some familiar faces, some not familiar faces, but we'll all get to know one another here within this next 55 minutes of time. I'm going to have Tahani, she is here representing Kappa Delta Pi, our KDP organization, which I know some of you are members of, and she's going to take this time to just introduce myself, my colleague Dr. Moravito, and my colleague Linda Malo-Holmes as well, and then we'll take it from there and tell you about where we're headed.
Thank you, Dr. Parenti. Very quickly, we would love to introduce our panel for today. The PD is presented by Dr. Parenti, who earned her doctoral degree in teacher preparation at the University of Southern California and is an assistant professor of literacy at St. John's University. Sorry, I'm reading this, but I'm not, off the top of my head. Also, prior to her work as a professor, she spent 15 years in the field of K-12 education, and she was a classroom teacher, a reading specialist, and a professional development consultant in diverse communities throughout Chicago, Los Angeles, and New York City. She currently presents at conferences nationally in areas related to literacy development and effective classroom-based Common Core standards implementation. Additionally, she serves on several editorial review boards and actively researches oral language development and fluency in struggling readers in urban landscapes and the effectiveness of preparing pre-service teachers. Also here with us today is Dr. Nancy Moravito. Did I say that right? And she earned her doctoral degree in learning, teaching, and diversity with a specialization in math and science education at Peabody College of Education and Human Development at Vanderbilt University. Dr. Moravito is currently an assistant professor of science education in the Department of Curriculum and Instruction at St. John's. She completed her undergraduate studies in biology and subsequently earning her master's degree in secondary education. Dr. Moravito taught biology, AP biology, and anatomy and physiology to students in grades 9 through 12 before pursuing her doctoral degree. As a doctoral student, Dr. Moravito had the privilege of working with elementary, middle school, and high school students and teachers across a range of grade levels to explore and improve upon students' science learning experiences. Dr. Moravito's her current work focuses on in-service and pre-service teachers' understanding of science and how this understanding influences classroom practice. Our third guest here with us today is Professor Linda Malo-Holmes, who is a math, or was a math teacher for the Board of Education for 34 years and has been a math coach 8 of those 34 years, and she also is a graduate of St. John's University, and she is now teaching, or she has been teaching for 5 years at St. John's math courses 1003 and 1004. And without further ado, the agenda for today would basically start with the basics, and then they will explain the Common Core shifts in math, and then the next generation science standards, and then at the end we will have a Q&A session when after that I guess Dr. Parenti could take over from there.
Sure. Excellent. Thank you so much, Tahani. Thank you for the fantastic introduction. And again, welcome everyone. Can you do me a favor as I flip to the next slide? Quickly introduce yourself to someone sitting around you, just in case you don't know one another. And I'm going to have you do that just a little bit. Okay, great. We're going to come back together in just 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1. welcome and thank you for joining us. I will have you chit chat here and there. Linda will have you chit chat here and there, and Dr. Morabito will have you chit chat here and there as well. As Tahani mentioned, this is our agenda for today. When we all met together last fall, we talked a little bit about just Common Core in general, its aims, and we talked specifically about English language arts. As we began the math conversation, so many questions arose. They evolved in this conversation, and people said, I need to learn a little bit more about this, and what might this look like? And so we said, you know what? Maybe we can have a Common Core part 2, where we specifically zero in on math, and then some of the areas that we haven't quite tackled yet as it relates to Common Core, one of which being science. So who we have with us today, I'm going to just do basic intros. Let's revisit Common Core, its general kind of intent. And from there, Linda will take over and talk a little bit more about math, and the shifts we've seen in mathematics. From there, Dr. Morabito will address something that some of you may be familiar with or not so familiar with. I know it's news to me all of the time when Dr. Morabito shares with me the next generation science standards and how this kind of reflects Common Core, but how maybe it's different in certain ways as well. So Dr. Morabito will share about that, and then we'll conclude with a question and answer session. So we're going to start Common Core, move into next generation science standards as well. Where we begin is right here. Familiarity with Common Core. This is what we addressed last fall and what you're hearing about here and there in your classes here at St. John's, out in the field as you're working with teachers and visiting classrooms. This is kind of all around us, okay? That is kind of the focus for where we're headed. We know that we've talked about how it was rooted in a staircase of complexity. The idea being that ultimately at the top of the staircase, 12th grade, we're looking for college and or career readiness, right? How do we reach that? Well, in mathematics, one skill built upon the next skill, builds upon the next skill in the staircase. When we talk it from an ELA or English language arts perspective, what we typically see is similar standards at each grade level, just varying in complexity. Okay, so just a very small dose here for kids, a little bit more here, and ample amounts of complexity up here in the 12th grade. But again, very similar skills, right? And we always kind of exaggerate this, and we talked about this through the area of writing. Writing, 3 basic types of writing, right? Narrative, informational, explanatory, and then opinion or argument. We'll see these at kindergarten, we'll see them at 8th grade. But in kindergarten, we'll just see this idea that we have to state an opinion, right? In 1st grade, we'll see an opinion with 1 reason. In 2nd grade, an opinion with 2 reasons, and then the staircase continues on, right? This is the thinking behind a staircase of complexity. So my question for you, as we just talk these basics, as you visited classrooms, as you've maybe designed lessons yourself around the Common Core in English language arts and mathematics, what have you seen, what have you experienced that are positives, and maybe on the other side, not so positives or challenges? Just begin that conversation with one another. We'll talk together in just 2 minutes. Okay, a minute and we will talk together. Okay, 30 seconds group and we talk. Pull us back together. observed, things that maybe you've experienced as you've implemented lessons that are kind of rooted or based in the Common Core. Without that's my common joke, my equity parents, right? I don't have them with me. For the good of the group, anyone want to share one thing you've noticed?
I'm gonna share
Yeah, thanks,
your
Linda.
expression. You say stretches the brain. I love it.
Remember that.
Yes, I put that on a couple of my things
I-
now with your name. Yes.
See, this is amazing what happens. Teachers, right, are one another's best resource.
Yes.
I tell my students that, and it's very true. I learned that very early on, just listening to other teachers talk or watching other teachers teach. We learn so much. So, thank you, Linda.
Yes.
And truly, we say this. Oftentimes, as classroom teachers, when we're implementing a Common Core-based lesson, our brain stretches or hurts just a little bit. Like even thinking about how we're going to plan this. And then when we ask kids, we can tell their brain is stretching a little bit. That is the intent here, right? This kind of rigorous instruction, higher level thinking based activities, however you want to say that. Someone else, give me another plus. Something you've observed. Yes.
I've seen students like just, I'm in English concentration, so like when I see like a standard English classroom, like, especially like I was observing like a 7th grade classroom, and they think like much more like, they think a lot deeper, they speak more eloquently. And I'm like, well, when I was in 7th grade, like I didn't have a Common Core, so like the only thing I was worried about was like, you know, whether I would get a Twizzler if I got the answer right or not. And
or matching the character to
yeah.
the name.
And
right?
they're like asking like, oh, and how can we infer this? And like, and I'm just like, how are you this smart?
Fantastic. I think you've highlighted a key portion of Common Core and the intent here in the ELA shifts, use of academic language, academic vocabulary, right? You'll hear kids say, use this terminology, inference, right? They'll say it's the central idea, the character, or whatever it might be. You're hearing even little kids using the language of the discipline, right? And that's what's encouraged. Fantastic example. Anyone else a plus before we move to not so positives? Okay, how about not so positives challenges? Just 2 for the good of the group. Okay, got one here, and then one over here. So Emily, go ahead.
I've noticed that a lot of the students that I work with when I'm observing, like their parents don't know how their homework is supposed to be done because they weren't, especially with math and science, they were not taught that way and they don't want to mess up. Like I tutor a kid in 4th grade and I don't want to teach him the wrong thing because I don't know the method that he's supposed to be using and I want to do it my way, and my way is not what they're looking for because they're looking for such a specific method. And I guess it's difficult for people that didn't learn the Common Core way to assist students. It's just
Fantastic.
for everybody.
This is a very common observation and common commentary that teachers will share with us, is that I was trained or learned maybe one way to teach division, and now someone's asking me to teach 3rd graders 3 different ways to divide. And this is complex for the teacher, right? Let alone for the student. So teachers having to get up to snuff as far as the area of content that they're teaching in order to actually deliver a lesson effectively. And Linda's going to talk a little bit about this and the challenges teachers have experienced and what they're doing to overcome that. Dr. Morbido, another kind of not so positive or challenge.
It's actually kind of, it's a little positive and negative.
Yay, it's a hybrid.
Positive.
The scientist has a hybrid.
Positive is that Common Core really emphasizes the importance of looking at using literacy skills in a lot of different contexts. So in the context of science, which is important. Drawback being, and this is where I come into play later, is that they really don't give teachers direction in terms of what science content should be addressed through those ELA tools
And
and
this
skills.
is why we're so happy. We have both of my colleagues here today for Dr. Morbido to speak about science. This is what teachers are asking. Where do I even begin with this? How does Common Core, ELA, and math overlap into the sciences? But also, am I losing sight of the specific content I need to be teaching in science, and where do I gather that information? Fantastic. Melissa, last but not least, share with us a not so positive or a challenge.
I just think that it was like implemented kind of poorly. Like I know my brother's now he's in 11th grade, but last year this Common Core was like thrown onto him, and as a 10th grader, he's set in his ways of the way he's doing math, and all of a sudden the teachers are like, oh no, you have to do it this way instead, and he was like completely thrown off, and math is like his favorite subject, so I just think it should have started like at kindergarten and moved up with those kids, because kids are getting thrown off.
How do we honor that old way is still kind of a correct way? It still works, right? But how do we also introduce these new ideas as well? I think we're going to do a great job So we're gonna take all of those ideas and move forward into specific challenges related to mathematics, and then Dr. Morabito's gonna take over as it relates to science, okay? So I'm gonna turn it over to Linda first. Linda, you don't have slides, right?
No, I
Okay, perfect. So I'm just gonna leave this kind of up and running.
Okay.
And over.
Hi, welcome. I'm so glad many of you are here. What I decided to do this time is to actually show you some of the questions, and let's look at them and actually see where are the kids struggling and where are they not, okay? So, you can find these questions also. I only took questions involving fractions. So we're going to go through fractions through the years, okay? And of course, Engage New York is the city website, okay? And that is the site you can actually go on for annotated questions. Now, Pearson, who was the testing company for the last 5 years, okay, is no longer as of next month. It's the new, and you'll put it on the top, please. It's Questar, Questar, Questar. And I advise you to go on their website. I'm a Google person, okay, so I don't know exactly what it is. And just sign up for their newsletter as new teachers, okay, so you'll know what's going on. The New York City gives a 5-year contract to every company. So Pearson's ended, so Questar is the new one. The new test is supposed to be a little shorter, 2 less questions on every multiple choice, and this whole idea of unlimited timing. So what does that mean? Well, if you had an hour for a test, okay, general education, and maybe you had an IEP that said you needed time and a half, that gave you 90 minutes. And then if you needed double time, it gave you 120 minutes. Well, now everyone has unlimited timing. Plus or minus, we don't know. In middle school, 8th graders will say, take as long as you want, that we don't have to go to science, okay? A little kid, I don't know, does he need it more, does he not need it? Okay, it's unlimited timing with productive work. Meaning, if you're doing the test and then all of a sudden you fall asleep, your test is over. Okay? Are you tired or are you gonna continue working or whatever? So that unlimited timing is a new term, and we'll find out. It could be a horror schedule-wise for the school. Okay, when do we serve somebody lunch? Do we have to have bag lunches now because lunch, the last period is period 6, cafeteria closes, everybody cleans up, you know, there's all kinds of problems there. So we're gonna find out. This is like the experimental year of that whole idea. So these are questions from last year's test, and what's next to it, okay, we're gonna go from grade 3, and you will see underneath, okay, I literally cut and paste the percentage that was correct. So the first question says, okay, this is a 3rd grade, okay? They have a flag, they divided it into equal sections, doesn't say how many, colored 3 of the sections gray, and then the fraction says what fraction of the flag is gray. 92% of the kids got this right. Well, what bothers me is it should have been 100%, okay? How come it's 92? But it's great when it's 92%. Because if you actually look at the choices, okay, it's 1/3, so there's 3 gray ones, okay? 3 out of 8, okay? 3 out of 5, or 5 out of 8. They don't have 2 out of 12. They don't have 60 out of 100. They have all the common mistakes. Okay? So you can see 3 and 5 are not. How many kids would pick 3 out of 5?
This one.
This one?
This kid, yeah.
Okay.
I had to look twice, and I'm like, oh, no.
And what you do, you don't even need all this stuff on the top. You just need the question because it has a visual picture.
Yes.
But you will notice also that the questions are very nice and sharp. 1/3, 3/4, that's nice. Kids can find an answer.
Now, I remember at one point along the way, someone asked me to develop test items, and I had to intentionally create these, what they call distractors. I couldn't do it. I
Right.
took on the task for maybe, one brief portion of time, but it's tricky. They almost intentionally place these.
Well, that's
things.
what we're actually
Right.
looking, okay? So if you look at question 14, which is also a third grade question, also has a picture, okay, so it seems very similar, but only 80% of the kids got it right. Because if you look at the choices, it's words. And if you can't read, you can't do this question. Okay? Was working on the math problem, she was asked to save parts of the figure so that 5, 6. Okay? What does she need to complete it? Okay, she needs to do 4 more, she needs to do 3 more, she does that. And the words, the numbers are in words. It doesn't say 4, but 4. That's what makes it Common Core. Stretches the brain a little bit, as we said. Okay, so this is 80%. And this is a third grader. Seems easy for you, but this is when they're first learning fractions. Then we go to another third grade question, and these 3 were on the same test. And this is totally abstract. There's a picture, but there's no fractions in between. Okay, so this was 67% of the kids got it correct. The choices are nice. They're no words, okay? But can they think outside of the box without the picture there? Okay, so it says which fraction represents the point R on the number line. Okay, so let's see. There's 1, 2, 3, 4 lines, so the bottom has to be a 4. I'm thinking like the kid, okay? But there's not 4 sections. There's only 3, from 0 to the first line, from the second line to the third line, okay? All right, so you have to count up your sections. So anything that has a 4 on the bottom should be eliminated, but I'll tell you, the majority of the kids put 3/4. That's why they have that choice there. Questions? So third grade went from a very solid picture, okay, you pick out how many times when you're in elementary, or if you're doing elementary, we have worksheets and worksheets on what percent is colored, what fraction is colored, okay, so that's the easy part, to something abstract as this. Let's look at fractions in the 4th grade. There's those pictures, oh that's nice, but then at the same time there's all those words. Okay, and 68%. Students shaded below to represent the following fractions. Which 2 shaded equivalent fractions? Equivalent fractions is something that is learned in the 3rd grade and passed on to the 4th grade as proportions, cross multiply and see if the product is the same. But you have to do a little work here. You have to literally look at every one of those and see the shaded. So this is 1, 2, 3, 4 out of 6, 2 out of 4, okay, 3/4, okay, 1/3, 2/3, sorry. Okay, so which 2? What do we got there? Maybe you'll have one kid actually see, well, look at Walter and look at Brittany. And if I take Walter's and I add a couple of more lines, it'll be Brittany's picture. 3rds and 6ths. But that's a bright student. Okay? And that's hopefully what we're doing. Instead of teaching them to put 4, 6 equals, reduce it. Okay, you could reduce it. You could put this picture on top of that picture, if you're good in that sense. It's all different ways of actually doing it. And then, of course, you have to make sure that it reads correctly. 4th grade. take two circles and put them into each other? Or have a fraction, or they don't even understand the picture. So this is a complex picture already. And it says, what fraction of a complete turn? That's a vocabulary word. What's a complete turn in a fraction? You have to, in a circle. A complete turn is 360 degrees. Oh, they all have 360 on the bottom. So now there's something else there, because if I can find the one that has 360, then that has to be the answer. But they all have 360. Okay? So it says, she moves the spinner shown below. What fraction of a complete turn throughout is 270? 57% of the kids got this right. Do you see the complex of the question?
What I'm thinking of is the preparation of the teachers presently in the classroom
That's
to
really
deal with this. Because I oversee the alternative teacher certification program, and many of them do not come from background. None of them come from background in education. And their preparation in order to do this.
You're talking about the fellows, correct?
I'm talking about the
Or
fellows program.
Yeah.
Yep, the fellows program. Because it became evident with the algebra common core. It's reading really, it's not math. Same type of thing.
Well, that's why we stress that what you talked about it also, is the inference that you do in the vocabulary. I do a lot of parent workshops, and one of the things that we do in the first grade, the kids say 7 plus 3. Tell me the math sentence. The sum of the addends, 7 plus 3 is 10. And the parents said to me, why do they have to know that? They're in first grade. 7 plus 3 is 10. 6 plus 4 is 10. 5 plus 5 is 10. No. Because they have to get used to the words, the sum, because they're going to read it someplace in a word problem. And if you're an 8th grade math teacher now, okay, you better know your high school mathematics. Because functions and anything with slope and things like that has been brought down. We were talking about it, there's 2 girls here that were just in my class, and we were saying, 2nd grade math used to be easy. It's not anymore. And some of the elementary school teachers are common branch, they're not math majors. When you go into middle school now, grade 7 and above, you have to be a subject teacher, like you are in a high school. You have to take the 7 through 12 exam. So you're right.
And Linda, you might have a sense, or you might not, but our kind of lower elementary grades, like a 2nd, a 3rd, a 4th, considering departmentalizing for ELA and math, more so than we have in the past.
The union paper said grade 5.
Oh,
Yeah,
okay,
grade 5 they're considering it,
okay.
where the kids in the 5th grade have a math teacher. Yeah.
Because you'll find this, and I found this as a 3rd grade teacher, I have my 3rd grade teacher peers, and we excel in different areas, right? Why not capitalize on a teacher's skill set?
Yes.
Especially when you're looking at some purpose, okay.
Yeah. Okay, that's okay. I know I only have 5 more minutes or 2 more minutes.
2
So
minutes.
can we look at grade 5, which is the back, which is a 49%? And then I continue to grade just fractions through the years, okay? So this is a terrible question, as you can see, 49% got it right. Okay, because this says which equation or equations. So there could be 2 answers here. So if you look at it, common mistakes, add in fractions, add the tops. Okay, add the bottoms, or 3 plus 15 is 18. Okay, so hopefully you say no to that one. The next one, I know it's multiples of 10, but you have to add a 0, so this becomes 40 over 100. So 40 plus 32 is 72. That's the answer. But it's not. But there is a choice that says equation 2 only. So now you have to teach the kids equation 2 is part of your answer. Is there another answer that has equation 2 in it? The majority of kids would have stopped right there. Not reading the question correctly, it says which equation or equations. So we can eliminate C, and we can go down to D and see if 4 is okay. Now let's see 4. We add a 0, it's 60 plus 27 is 87. So it's choice. The problem, or a good teacher will not only teach the kids to find the answer, but to tell me why the others are wrong.
And it's almost like this mathematical endurance.
Yeah.
You know, some get it, the first response, I was like, oh, I got this, I'm done with that, moving on. I don't really want to challenge myself to see if it's 3 and 4, 2 and 4. So it's training them to, again, stretch the brain and have this endurance mathematically.
If you just look at question 19, next one on the test, it's 90%, but this is an old question. You know what I mean when I say old? It's not a Common Core question. This is a computation. What's the product? You have to know the vocabulary word. Okay, but basically it's 5 times 3 is 15 and 8 times 4. Why didn't 100% of them get it right? Because they probably added them,
And I think
and that choice is there.
this is a perfect place to conclude what you said. It's termed an old question, right? This is what is students, as former students, we're accustomed to, right? Computation, computation, computation. And now rarely do we see this.
Yeah.
We see this.
It
But what the
continues to
numbers are
radiate.
saying,
Yeah.
is everyone still comfortable with this?
Right.
How do we, and we continue this conversation, and Linda, we may have a couple questions for you when
Sure.
we get to the Q&A. How do we get everyone comfortable with this, right? And how do we truly make this what they call a shift? So without, I'm going to copy Tahani here, further ado. I am going to turn it over to Dr. Morbido, and I'll have her little pieces. Here's hanging in here somewhere.
All right, so you all have been engaging in some discussions and thinking about Common Core standards. All right, so we've talked about ELA, we've talked about math. I mentioned something in there about science fits into this picture somewhere, but where exactly does that happen? So we're going to take a little bit of time to think about what are some of the implications of these standards for science instruction. Just out of curiosity, show of hands here, how many of you are childhood concentration? So the vast majority, most of you are childhood. Do I have any adolescent science folks? So if you are adolescent science, this will be of particular interest to you. If you are childhood, this is of particular interest to you because you will be responsible, more than likely, for teaching science in your classroom. For those of you that are neither, just bear with me, please. And hopefully you'll find it interesting anyway, because then we do talk a bit about connections to other disciplines. So this is just a little blurb from Common Core that I want to start. We're starting the Common Core, and then I'll show why we're going to move away from the Common Core in just a moment. In the Common Core, they say the standards set requirements not only for English language arts, ELA, but also for literacy in history/social studies, science, and technical subjects. Just as students must learn to read, write, speak, listen, and use language effectively in a variety of content areas, so too must the standards specify the literacy skills and understandings required for college and career readiness in multiple disciplines. So what Dr. Parenti mentioned earlier. So we see science here. It's mentioned. But if you dig into Common Core standards, you're really looking at how to engage students with literacy skills related to science. They don't tell you anything about science content. What am I supposed to be teaching to my kindergarten students, or my 4th graders, or my 9th graders? What am I supposed to be doing? Common Core, unfortunately, won't tell you that. That's why I said before it's kind of like a pro-con in terms of Common Core. It's good because there is an effort to show these connections among all these disciplines that often are taught very separately. But if you are a teacher going into the field you're going to be teaching science content, they don't really tell you a whole lot about what you're supposed to be doing when. So what have you seen? If you've been in schools, if you're doing observations for observation hours or practicum, or if you're student teaching, what have you seen teachers use to guide their science instruction? Yeah.
I've seen a lot of like fill in this diagram, like predict what you want. Like I went to Divine Wisdom and I observed a 7th grader classroom, and the teacher assigned randomly groups of like 3s, and she gave out a human body, and she said, you do this system, you do this system, and the students had no clue where the systems were, but then afterwards she used that as like, you guys were close, but this is what it really is, and she made them compare and contrast.
So what do you think, that's a great example, what do you see as being, why did the teacher focus on that? Why was the teacher talking about body systems? What told the teacher, this is something I should be doing with this class of students?
She showed me that there were standards that she had to address, but she also was going off of a textbook that she showed me as well, and she heard the students, they questioned why they weren't learning about the body also, and she knew that they had some kind of previous knowledge, and she wanted to see where they stood before she addressed it further lessons.
Okay, so she's doing a nice job of kind of assessing prior knowledge, seeing what is it that my students are bringing to the table. But she's looking, so she said that she mentioned some standards. Did she happen to mention what those standards were?
No.
Okay, and textbook, right? What else have people said? Has anyone seen anything else being like, in addition to textbook or maybe some sorts of standards that teachers have used to kind of guide their science instruction? Has anyone else seen anything else? So if I'm a K-12 teacher, and if I am working in the state of New York, if you look at the New York State standards, we're not going to take a lot of time to talk about them because you very well might end up teaching outside of this state. If you look at the actual New York State standards, there is one science standard. One. It just says science. There's a very generic description. You can then go a little bit further. You can, if you dig into the right sources, you'll see they differentiate by living environment, physical setting, and then there's some key ideas in there that students are supposed to know. But it's very general. It's very generic. It doesn't really help distinguish very much what we're supposed to be teaching our students and when. Okay, so then you have other resources in the state like the scope and sequence and all, but there's something that is, there's a movement that's been happening nationally to really help standardize this a little bit better, better across the country. So I'm going to give a very brief history of science education and the standards because this could go on forever. We're going to start off by going back to 1957. Oh my gosh, that's so long ago. Not that long ago. We see these newspapers here. Russia wins the race into outer space. Space age is here. This is a model of what? Sputnik. What's the big deal about Sputnik? Why am I even bothering to mention this? Why was it important? Has anyone learned about this at all? Anyone else want to chime in? Might not? Yeah.
Wasn't it like the first satellite sent out into space?
Not us.
The Soviet Union.
Soviet Union, right. Oh my gosh, they beat us to space. Our math and science, it's not cutting it. We've got to do something about this. We've got to really ramp up our science education and our math education so we can catch up to the Soviets and try to, be able to make these developments more quickly. So this was one of our first really big pushes to strengthen and make our science and math education more robust in the States. Okay, fast forward quite a few years, 1996, our first set of standards come out, the National Science Education Standards developed by the National Research Council, a collaboration between research scientists, teacher educators, science teachers, really laying out, okay, here's the content that we're going to learn grade by grade. Much like what Dr. Parenti said in terms of that staircase, very much the same type of layout. You're gradually building upon that knowledge over a student's K-12 education. Then a little bit, a few years later, we had this Atlas of Science Literacy came out. Scientific literacy started to become a term that was more and more prevalent. Again, laying out content that should be addressed across different years of schooling. And then in 2012, and then very quickly thereafter, 2013 produced the most recent movement in terms of science standards. So we had the framework for K-12 science education practices, cross-cutting concepts and core ideas, developed by the National Research Council, same people as developed the standards in '96. And then eventually what built off of them is the next generation science standards, which came out or released in the spring of 2013. This is kind of the big operating set of standards that's nationally available to teachers. So I'm going to spend a little bit of time talking about this because this is where if you were teaching kindergarten students, if you're teaching 12th graders science, this is gonna be your go-to resource in terms of what am I supposed to be teaching to my students and when. Like most standards, it won't tell you how to teach, but it tells you what is supposed to be addressed to what grades. And that did not show up very well in terms of the contrast there. So I'm just going to point out a couple key features, and then I gave you all a sample that I'm just going to highlight a few things. This is a really kind of quick overview. I'm happy to talk with you more. What makes these different from those ones that were developed in '96? Why do we bother coming out with new ones 20 years later? So one of the big differences is that they really focus on students engaging in the practices of science and engineering. Oh my goodness, that E word. Why is that important? STEM, which stands for Science,
Technology, engineering,
Engineering,
and mathematics.
mathematics, and a lot of times now you'll see more and more STEAM, you've integrating arts in there as well. But the practices of science and engineering are now showing up in the next generation science standards. And it's not just about content. So they do certainly provide guidance about content, but they also really connect to those science and engineering practices, the nature of science. So what is science all about? What is it that research scientists do? What does that mean for us? And then they also make connections to the Common Core. And we'll look at what that looks like in just a moment. One other thing that's really nice about them, if you go online, which I'll show you in just a moment, they are searchable by grade level, by topic, by practice. Unfortunately, don't have a lot of time to get into what all of that means, but we'll see an example in just a moment in cross-cutting concepts. So we're going to take a look. If you were to go to nextgenscience.org, and that is notated at the top of the handout that I provided to you, this is where it will take you. Okay. So you can see, you can do a quick search. You can put search terms in, cross-cutting concepts, just so you can get an idea of what that means. It's things that kind of span across all science disciplines. So big ideas, patterns, cause and effect, systems and system models, energy and matter, structure and function. You could look by practice. This is what those practices are that I was talking about. Asking questions and defining problems, developing and using models, analyzing and interpreting data. You can look by disciplinary core idea. This is kind of when we get back to a little bit more the traditional view in terms of content. You can search by types of interaction, forces in motion, wave properties, information processing, cycles of matter and energy, inheritance of traits, natural selection, adaptation. You can see that they're separated by physical sciences and life sciences, earth and space sciences, and then ultimately down here we have engineering as well. And then you can also search by grade or by grade band. So there are a variety of ways that you can do this, and I prefer to go in through here. And you could search, and ultimately what you would find if we were to do a search, I picked out the standard of which you have a copy, is a middle school standard, because I figured that was kind of in the middle there that would apply. But you can see there's quite a lot of content in each of these. So if I pull one of these up, what am I going to see? You might see something that looks like this. Phew, that is a lot of information in one slide and in one place. So I'm going to give you a very quick overview of what these different parts of this mean. And then I'm happy to answer questions that you might have during the Q&A. So up at the very top, in this white rectangle, you'll see this is what are considered the performance expectations. And the way that the website describes them is these are accessible statements of what students should know and be able to do. It's a performance indicator. This is what students should be able to do in relation to this particular content. Students should be able to construct a scientific explanation based on evidence for the role of photosynthesis in the cycling of matter and flow of energy into and out of organisms. That's a mouthful. That's a lot that we want our students to be able to do. I will let you know, some states use this as their standard. Okay, if you were to have the list, if you're writing a lesson plan and you had to identify your standards for a particular lesson, some states, that's what they want to see. Other states want to see something a little bit different. They might want to see that, but also this combination of this middle, especially this big orange block right in the middle. These are all considered foundations. So we'll see we have a blue rectangle says science and engineering practices, the orange is disciplinary core ideas, and green is cross-cutting concepts. So this part in the middle is where we're actually getting into, this is kind of the meat in terms of the content of what is to be addressed. And when I address this in my methods courses, this is what I'm usually asking students to focus on, because I think this is where, especially at the elementary level, when people are really trying to figure out what is it that I'm supposed to be teaching my students at what grade level, this is really going to be the meat in terms of where you're going to focus. So these NGSS considers these foundation boxes to kind of combine to be able to allow students to do this performance expectation. You'll see, remember I said that they have connections to nature of science, that's over here. So there's a lot of information kind of pulled together graphically in these. And then finally, down at the bottom, we have other connections. So these are connections to other science disciplines, grade levels, and Common Core standards. So here we have connections to other DCIs in this grade band. That means disciplinary core ideas. And you could click on these, but I'm not going to take the time to do that. Looking at what does this look like across grade bands, much like when you just saw fractions across the different grade bands. Here we have science content and how it's going to be revisited at different grade bands. And then down at the bottom, considering that this is not part of Common Core, I thought it was a very nice tip of the hat by Next Generation Science Standards to say, okay, we know the teachers are really beholden to Common Core state standards, so I'm going to start helping them do some of that work to make these connections. So you'll see here are connections that might be relevant for ELA and literacy, and also for mathematics. Not to say that that's always going to align 100%, but there's some effort there to help teachers start to see how these things connect to one another, and how these different sets of standards connect to one another. That is, in a nutshell, very, very brief overview. I do want to let you know, much like you may have seen the Common Core app that's freely available, there is one for Next Generation Science Standards as well. So that, and also fully searchable in very many of the same ways.
Nancy, I'm going to borrow your last slide. I think it's fantastic. I love this, by the way. There's always an app for everything, right? That's the world we live in. I think this is fantastic because it really, really does highlight for us exactly what you shared at the start. Sure, Crow, that we're addressing English language arts, mathematics, Common Core in the other content areas, science, social studies, science,